What's up, my homies? Happy to have you back. It's been kind of a hot minute, hasn't it? I figured I'd get on here and do a quick update on the Luminous Maximus city well, not really city, but colony I've been working on for the past, I don't know how long, man. It's been almost a year, at least. Um, I think I've called them the Citizens of Sol or something like that. And also, too, I thought it'd be just kind of nice to chat about stuff. Hope you guys are having a good weekend. I have Monday off because of, I believe it's Labor Day, right? Got a lot of stuff to kind of catch up on, but first I'll talk about the colony here. Okay, so, God, where do I even start, man? Well, let's start with the number of colonists that I have. Got about 126. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, mission people show up on that readout. Because I've got one right now he's got I think it's what do they call that? Paralytic abasia. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. That's how I think of it in my mind. Anyway, he's part of a mission that we're gonna hopefully get some honor out of, I guess. And for me, honor has become a little more of an important aspect of this game. In late game, at least, because my main person here, Gabs, she is now a Praetorian, I think, or forgive me, Baroness. Um, and this is her little throne room area, or well, not throne room. What do they call that? Basically, a royal bedroom, as to where with this is the actual throne room. But it's reached a point where it's almost impossible to, like, I don't know, man, have any kind of articulate design with anything that's happened lately. And a lot of it is because these GD boomalopes, man. These things get really difficult to manage. And that's essentially my primary source of energy, as you can see, because I've got the females up here, I've got the males down here, and whenever I need to replenish them, I put a male in here and, a female, and let them do their thing and increase the numbers. But at one point, before what you see here existed, I did have the boomalopes essentially all in this pin and this pin. And yes, they are pins, despite the fact that I have hay growing in them right now. Or at least they were. Maybe they're not now. It's been such a long time. But at one point, at least, these were pins. And it got so unmanageable that the game literally began to kind of, like, stall a little bit. Like, it got really kitschy for a while. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen still every once in a while, but for the most part, I think having them out here and at a point of design where they can't reproduce on their own like they were able to before, I think that's kind of reached a point with a proper balance between the resources that I have on my system and basically gameplay. Because now, despite the fact that every once in a while you can still see some of the colonists, like, they'll move a second and then they'll move a second, and then, there's like that start stop type thing that you can sometimes see in the ticks, I guess they call it. You can still sometimes see that every once in a while whenever shit's getting really hairy, like if there's like multiple things going on or whatever. But all in all, though, it's definitely playable, and I've had pretty good amount of enjoyment out of it. So anyway, moral of that story is just, if you're in the business of raising boomalopes, your system will be directly proportional or I should say, your system's your system's ability to allow you to enjoy the game will be directly proportional to the number of boomalopes you raise. I hope that makes sense. So anyway, you just gotta kind of find that balance. Moving on though, yeah, the boomalopes, that's my primary energy source. And what I'm trying to do is basically stack up all of my batteries. And this, like I said, man, this was more of a reaction. I would, if I knew that it was going to wind up being a situation where I had to like be careful of my energy as much as I've needed to be careful of it about, I wouldn't have put my batteries, right inside of my defensive wall. So I mean, obviously that's a pretty stupid thing to do. In retrospect, if I could go back in time and do things differently, I probably would have done something where I would have designed the base to like have my batteries like somewhere in here or something like that. And I don't know, man. Maybe one of these days I might try to go back and try to do that if I gut it out with this colony, because you need to remember, man, I'm still using like 1.4 and they're now out to whatever the latest is, and I gotta admit I'm hankering to play this game where you can make the mobile colonies and stuff with the spaceships and spacecraft or whatever it is that they've got now. And plus, too, I think the latest release also provides for fishing for a change. So there's a lot of neat stuff in the latest, but because of how much investment I've put into this stupid colony here, I can't turn my back on it, man. I've got to keep going. So anyway, food, food and power have been the biggest situations that I've had to deal with this stinking colony, man. Um, Before I moved these boomalopes out here, like I said earlier, they were in here, and it got to a point to where they were unmanageable, and and so I thought I could deal with it by letting them have the outside perimeter, meaning all of the space that's out here, because there's a lot of like grass and stuff that grows out here. But that got to a point where it was just so damned unmanageable because I was stupid in how I was raising the boomalopes because I didn't separate the males from the females, and so they were just they were just kind of like a almost like a virus, you know. And so what I did was I was like, all right, to hell with this, man. I'm yelling broken arrow, and I just went ahead and slaughtered them all except for like maybe a few, like a handful. And boy, oh boy, you should have seen that, man. That turned out to be one hell of a mess. There was like shit blowing up all over the place and stuff, and that was while the majority of the boomalopes were currently suffering like starvation and stuff like that. So it really had me pulling my hair out, man. Uh, and that took in game, I'd say it took maybe about a full week to kind of get ahead of and to get to a point where there was some semblance of at least the boomalope control, because what eventually crept up on me during that same time was starvation of the colonists, despite the fact that I was using some of the boomalope for food. Because at that time, I can't remember exactly what was going on, but a lot of the rice basins here, these things, they weren't growing. I can't remember exactly why. I think it was because I was running out of energy, because I was obviously killing my energy source. And it was around that time that I bit the bullet and started building a bunch of these wind turbines and these solar panels. But because I didn't have power, that meant that I had problems generating these goddamn components. And so, I mean, it was just one thing after another, and it really got me close to the point where I was like about to tell this game to go fuck itself. But somehow, through a wing and a prayer, I managed to get ahead of it all, and I'm basically where I'm at now. So I think the core design of my colony here is pretty awesome. But like I said earlier on, in retrospect, I wish I could have found a way to do things a little bit differently with how I've grown crops and, how I've managed energy in these battery arrays. Because I don't like having my batteries right, obviously, behind my defensive wall, because that obviously provokes exploit. And another thing too that you got to watch out for is how you store these damn chem fuel things, because if one goes off, man, you better have something prepared to get ahead of that, because that's just going to be like a damn chain effect. And this is by no means a great way to do this. But I got to a point where I was like, look, I've got to do something, man, because I've got to put this shit somewhere. I've got to find a way to store it, blah, 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 blah. And this is kind of how I came up with that. Again, it's not perfect, but it's kind of getting me by. Now, there have been raids every once in a while, and a lot of it is because of the fact that I'm dumping my my toxic waste packs. Let me give you a lay of the land here, show you where I'm talking about. So whenever my toxic waste packs get to a point to where they need to be dealt with, I'm always dropping them out. You can see the pollution here, out right here. And the pollution, as you can see, is extreme. And but I've had to do something, because I don't have those things that I've mentioned before in other videos. I can't remember what they're called, but they're the things that basically take care of the waste packs ecologically, or environmentally, I mean, where it's like safe and stuff. And the reason I haven't done that is because I don't have the parts that I need to build them with. And you get those parts from summoning those damn things, those robots. But I haven't done that yet because I'm not done with my turret system that you see here that I'm in the process of designing. Now, between you and me, I don't know how effective that's going to be, because, like, for example, if they drop in like right here or something like that, then it's going to be, I don't know, man. I don't know what I don't know how I'll deal with that. I've got like I've tried to stagger most of my colonists to like have an EMP launcher for every like 3 or 4 or 5 colonists. That way it'll be kind of spread out, and if something like that were to ever happen, I can use them to disable or temporarily disable the machines, and then have the guys with the whatchamacallums, these things, the charge rifles, come in and just take them out. Either way, though, even if they land out here or somewhere out here, it's going to be a messy proposition, because there's going to be some shit that's going to wind up getting destroyed and stuff, and it's just going to be one of those things I'm just going to have to kind of deal with. But in order to try to mitigate it, I've tried to do things like install these little EMP traps, and I'm currently in the process of doing that in lieu of building the rest of these turrets. Now, once I have all of these turrets built, I'm going to finally summon those mechanoid threats, or whatever it is, that you destroy and then harvest from in order to get the parts that you need to be able to make those toxic waste pack disposal building things. And I don't know what the math is, but I'm gonna have to have probably like 4 in each of these little wings right here at minimum to even come close to like staving off the amount that I generate through my charging stations and these things, right? Or this one thing. I've only got one of these. But I don't know how many mechs I've got now, man, but I've got a shit ton. I've got like, God, I don't know how many. I don't know. But it's a lot. And the thing that has been really difficult to try to get ahead of are the stupid little zones. Because as most of you probably realize, whenever you're in this game, you only have a certain number of zones that you can define. And I'm assuming that they did it that way just simply because of all the math and computation and stuff that goes into making zones. So I suppose that's a magic number of some kind. Now, I do know that there's like add-ons or modules or whatever that you can plug in and build more zones with. I'm somebody, though, that doesn't like modules or add-ons, extensions, whatever you want to call them. I've always just been like a vanilla guy. So I try to work with what I've got. Now, I don't know if that's changed in the latest release. I'm hoping it has, because it would really open up a lot of doors. But finding that special balance with all of the different utilitarian kinds of contexts that you have to balance whenever you're dealing with zone definitions, that's been a really, really difficult thing to try to get ahead of. And I've tried to prioritize my boomalope feeding uh, and the livestock down here feeding, as well as my crop stuff. You know, those I always try to prioritize. And as you can imagine, defining all of that with all of these living rooms and bedrooms and all this shit, these kitchens and everything, has really been a trial and tribulation to say the least. But as of right now, though, I gotta admit, it's actually going a lot smoother than what I ever could have envisioned. Because now that I've got all of the boomalopes separated between the sexes and in their own pens, that's allowed me to kind of have a little more control over the number of boomalopes that I have to try to find a balance with in terms of like my resources and the paths and zones, and filling up these stockpile zones with their feed and everything. Because what I've tried to do is like put a feed zone like every certain amount of space. Like there's one right there. I think there's like one, yeah, right there. There's another one right here, and down here there's one. So I mean, there's, if you do, I haven't, I'm not one of those guys that's sat there and like, I don't know, looked up boomalope on some wiki page to figure out its proximity of sensing food or anything. I've not done that. I've just tried to eye it more or less, and for whatever it's worth, it seems to be kind of working, because I don't really struggle anymore with starving boomalopes. Now, sometimes they might wind up getting a little hungry, but if they do, it's almost always because my lifter mechanoids are charging. Because I obviously have a certain number of lifters, and the way I've defined these zones, I've tried to make it in correlation to the number of lifters that I have, so that I can kind of find that sweet spot of allowing them the most amount of efficiency possible to basically take whatever hay has been harvested and plopped over, and take it and plop it over into these zones. And so far, the latest iteration of that effort has really been paying off, because I have, it's been a long time since I've seen any boomalope struggling with food. Let me see here. What else is worth discussing? So anyway, yeah, once I get done making these turrets, I'm gonna finally get the gumption to go ahead and probably summon at least one wave of those mechanoids, so that I can harvest the chip or whatever and start developing the next tier of mechanoid. Because something else I haven't mentioned is the fact that I'm still on like whatever it is, like tier 1 or whatever of the first types of mechanoids that you can get, which is agrohands, lifters, and constructoids. But once clean sweepers and a couple of those other ones. But these are basically your first tier, and then once I get that chip, research it, and so on, I'll be able to, I think, if I remember right, I think I can develop some mechanoids then that can be full-time fabricators, which is, I think, is what they're actually called, fabricator mechanoids or whatever, because that means then that they can work full-time, they don't need to sleep or anything, and that will free up the guys that I've currently got assigned to this type of work. And what's cool about my base right now, at least, is the fact that not only do I have those 4 benches, but I've got like 3 benches here, 3 over here, 3 here, and 3 here. So if I can develop, that same number of fabricators, it's gonna really ramp up the threshold of production that I'm going to be able to generate with things like components and stuff. And that'll also free up a lot in terms of my colonists that can then go around and focus a little more on mining with these things right here, the deep drills. Because despite the progression and the workforce that I have, mining is always an issue. I mean, it's not really an issue right now, as you can see. I mean, but it leaves room for improvement, because I've had numbers before that were up in like 6 or 7,000, really crazy numbers. Even double digit or 5 digit amounts too. Even there were a few times when I had that much, but that was usually just because I wasn't really in the process of using it. But what I'd like to do is get to a point where I've got like 1,000 components, 20,000 metal, stuff like that. So I'm a ways from having that. But all in all, it's really going really well, all things considered. Considering the number of moving parts that are going on in all of this, and especially the food demand. The food right now for the colonists, I mean, that's the biggest concern, I think, at the moment, because I don't really have as many prepared meals and stuff that I'd prefer to have. So that's that's getting a little worrisome there. And I have plenty of meat for the most part, but there's always food though. I mean, well, generally there's always a thing that needs to be done, but I don't know what to say really, man. I guess it's always either crops, energy, or food that take up the most amount of your time. So anyway, that's kind of like the update of the people of Soul, Luminous Maximus here. That's where I am. I would have updated a long time ago, but man, there's just been a shit ton of stuff that's been going on in my life. Uh, I don't know if I mentioned this in a couple videos ago, but my family wound up having some deaths in the family, and as you can imagine, that's been kind of a thing. Now, I say a couple deaths. We've had actually more than that, but it's not all happened at once. I mean, it's been in the span of like about 3 or 4 years. So the way I talk about it, it probably sounds like it's all happened at once or something like that. But trying to deal with it all, try to put it all, like, if you're like, for example, if you're not on the best terms with your mom and dad and they pass away, I mean, it kind of creates a situation where you've got to try to like mentally and psychologically kind of rationalize things and figure things out and think things through. I don't know really how to explain it, but anybody who's ever gone through death understands probably what I'm talking about. And the latest death was my grandmother, which was probably the person that I was closest to in my family. And so it's been kind of difficult doing that sort of thing with her, because the past few years haven't been good between her and I. I mean, it got to a point where I felt like I couldn't even have normal conversations with her. And it wasn't because, she was falling apart or, wasn't able to, like, mentally process things or anything like that. I don't think she had dementia, but, and I know for a fact that she didn't have Alzheimer's or anything more significant, but there were sometimes when you could tell that her focus wasn't there. I mean, she was cognizantly there in terms of, like, being able to talk to her and stuff like that, but whenever you would try to carry her focus on a respective subject, there would be times when she would act like she was sitting there talking to you about it, but then she would change the subject, or you would sometimes have to remind her something that you might have said. Not very often. It didn't really happen very often, to her credit, because, like I said, she was still pretty sharp. But but I think some of it could have been her age, but I think more than anything, a lot of it was just the fact that her and I kind of drifted apart. And the first time I ever noticed that kind of thing was whenever I moved away for college. I would sometimes drive home on the weekends, and whenever I would visit her, and you would sometimes come back and talk to her about things that you learned about her doing while you were gone. Things like, she would hang out with someone else in the family, and at first it wasn't really that big of a deal because it's not as if you're sitting there expecting an invite all the time. But when it slowly became a little more apparent that it was more of a habit, and well, let me rephrase that. through time, it became a situation where you began to realize that it wasn't as much of a habit as it was almost seemingly her trying to either avoid you or not really consider you because you weren't around, you know? I mean, we're all kind of guilty of that to a degree, I think, because when the more you're away from someone, the more it becomes a situation where if that person's out of sight, then 9 times out of 10, they're going to be out of mind. And it doesn't matter how close you are to the person, man. It's the reason you have to kind of nurture relationships, because if you don't, then what usually happens is that that person begins to kind of fade away from your thoughts. And then it doesn't mean that you hate them or don't love them or don't whatever. It's just one of those things. It's I think it's kind of natural. But I think with my grandmother, at least, there for the past, I'd say at minimum, these past 4 years, that out of sight, out of mind type thing began to kind of grow in towards animosity. We've got our mission guy here ready to go. Go ahead and do that. I'll explain what I'm talking about here in a second. Okay, so let me get him. I have to do this. What I try to do is avoid selecting somebody when they're on the verge of trying to relax or go to bed. You know, I'll use Gabs. So anyway, I graduated from college back in like, I think it was 2007, I think. And during that time was the phase when I felt like it was one of those out of sight, out of mind type of things. Now, don't get me wrong, back during that time frame, I still had a pretty good relationship with my grandmother or my grandparents in general. I could just tell, though, that every once in a while, you know, whenever I'd talk about them or talk to them, they had a kind of a separate life going on that didn't involve me as much as it used to when I was still like in their area, you know. And that was okay. I learned to grow with it because when you grow old, you or get older, you begin to kind of understand how people's lives work a little better, I think. But the problems began to kind of crop up whenever I wound up uh, moving back, moving back home from the city where I was basically give you some context here. I graduated in '07 and I accepted a job offer up in one of my big cities here in my state. Moved there for about a year, and during that time was during the 2008-9 recession stuff, and the company that I was employed at the time, uh, they began to have job cuts, and I missed the first wave, but I wound up biting the bullet on the second wave of job cuts. And let me see here. Okay, quest available Gabs. Ooh, she's gonna be a countess now. That's cool, I guess. Um, by the time I lost the job up there, though, in the big city, quote unquote, um, it was I think it was around '09, I think it was, and I was just kind of drifting at that point. You know, needless to say, I was going through all sorts of mental issues then too, because losing your first career job, as well as the girlfriend that you have at the time that you were 100% convinced you were going to eventually marry. I mean, that can do a lot of stuff to you. And I made the decision to move up even further north from the city that I was living at because I wanted to get out of the city to start with, and second of all, um, I felt like I felt like I still had some chances of job leads in the city that I moved from, because the town that I was moving towards that was further north, it was still close enough to the city where I felt like I could still probably find something. Well, anyway, after moving up that town and commuting all the way down to the city that I lost the job from or job at, I did that for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and I just couldn't make anything work, despite the fact that my background is in IT. The job market then was just horrible. Okay. The job market was horrible, and something had to give. So I eventually made the decision to come back home, go back to school in something that was outside of tech. And at the time, it was actually another bachelor's degree in English composition. And God, here we go. No, don't do that. This is the kind of stuff that freaking kills me. Okay, hold on a second. Let me get through this. Bicep is somebody that gives me a lot of hell sometimes. Do not do that. I don't want to kill the person. I still hate doing that though too, because I hate it whenever I've got to make them fight each other. Is she okay? Okay, yeah, she's fine. So what we're gonna do, let's get them all calm down now. We kind of looked out, because that's pretty minor stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and rescue them. Alright, there we go, good. I decided to eventually move back home because, like I said earlier, I was just kind of floating around in life, man. I needed some sort of path, even if it meant going back to school, which I didn't want to do, but I felt like at the time I didn't really have any other options or any other kind of direction, so I said, fuck it, let's do it. Started trying to pursue an English composition bachelor's degree. And during that time, I wound up accepting a basically a job offer as a grad assistant, which meant that I had to become a grad student. And I had somebody over there at the university that I was attending help me out with all that crap. And one thing led to another, and after about a year of doing that, I wound up accepting a job offer with my alma mater as a programmer analyst. It was during that time frame when I noticed my relationship with my grandmother kind of get a little worse, because I think in her mind she began to kind of view me as somewhat of a failure, because here I was losing my first career job. I lost somebody that I thought I was eventually going to get married to. I was going through all sorts of mental, emotional trauma from all of that type of experience. And here I was needing her help again for things like rent, because I didn't really have, at least during the beginning of returning back to school, I didn't have nowhere near the amount of financial ability to do all the stuff that I was trying to do in order to get my life back on track. And the reason I came back to school is because, that was when everything felt like it was right. And so that was the only thing that made sense to me at the time to do. Well, anyway, once I accepted the actual staff employment from my alma mater, meaning I was an actual staff member. I wasn't a grad student. I wasn't like an undergrad student worker type of person. I wasn't an intern. I was an actual full-on staff member. I began to be able to kind of foot things for myself in terms of my finances, and it was during that time that I wound up finally starting to pay for my own rent, paying for my own car, all this kind of stuff. And I was paying for a lot of that already, don't get me wrong, but I was now 100%, cord cut independent now. And I think it was during some of that stuff, though, that caused me to have anxieties about things like my car and my truck and my house and all this stuff, because when you when you're actually 100% independent, on your own, paying for your own shit, you know, no handouts at all from anyone, and especially when you're single, you come home each day after work and you can hear like the little creaks and cracks and stuff as you're walking throughout your house. You know, when you start the truck or the car up, you can sit there and listen for noises and panic whenever you start hearing things. It's like you have a different perspective on stuff that you wouldn't normally have if you felt like you had somebody kind of covering your six. Well, unfortunately for me, in a way, I didn't really have that because my grandparents, they were what now? Damn it. Oh, that's another thing I hate about this game is that these stupid kids, for some weird reason that I haven't figured out, I don't know if it's a bug or if it's something about my base or what, but the kids, they always wind up going into these horrible areas where it's freaking like 2,000 degrees and drawn on the floor as if that's some sort of acceptable thing. And whenever they do, this always happens. It's really irritating. Anyway, when you're single and you're paying for everything on your own, you learn quickly how easy it is to become undermined by anxiety. At least it's been that way with me, because and this is especially true whenever you don't really have any kind of money saved up, or you know, you're kind of more or less living paycheck to paycheck because you're worrying about all this other stuff that you're trying to get fixed, either with your car or your truck or your house or whatever. And that was exactly what it was like for me, because whenever I first got that job as an actual staff member and started having money to do things with, I was using all that money on stuff to like repair my car that I had at the time, or stuff related to my house. Because I live in a really old house for the most part, and it's got a basement that has a lot of work that needs to be done to it with things like waterproofing stuff, or even some of the walls I think sometimes need some attention. And as you may or may not know, whenever you're starting to deal with stuff like basement stuff for a house, that's some of the most expensive stuff that you can ever try to tackle. Well, anyway, that kind of stuff became the centerpiece of my life, man. Every single conversation I'd ever have with my grandmother, or basically just about anybody, there was always something in the conversation stream where I would bring up stuff either related about my house or my car or my truck, or excuse me, it's just stuff that was always on my mind, you know, stuff that I wanted to just have someone to talk to about. And when it came to my grandmother, she was always my go-to whenever it came to trying to find ways to relieve stress that way, because, you know, she was obviously the person that had a lot of money who always wound up helping me out with things, and she was also the matriarch of the family, so I felt like she should be somebody that I should be able to lean on for things just like just basic life advice. Well, as time progressed and she got older, that became harder and harder to do. I began to kind of get ahead of things with finances at least, but as far as like life advice is concerned, I got to a point with her to where I felt like I couldn't even get that out of her. And I think some of that's my fault in terms of how I'm characterizing it or looking at it, because it probably sounds like I'm somebody who's trying to look at my grandmother as if she's somebody that needs to give me stuff, you know. And I realize that about myself, and I try not to ever let myself fall into that pit, whatever that is. That fucking kid, I was thinking there for a second he was going to do that again. But I mean, it just got to a point where I couldn't even just talk to her about anything. I mean, every single time we would talk about anything, it would always result in things like arguments. Let me remove these real quick. That one there, and we'll move this one. Let's see here, where should I put this one? I'll put it right here. This one too. So anyway, To make a really, really, really long story short, it just got to a point to where the last year that my grandmother was alive, it just got to a point to where her and I weren't even really talking. And there's some regret about that because it created such a level of animosity in me to where I didn't even attend her funeral. And I know that sounds horrible, and in many ways it is horrible. But on the same hand, too, I'm leaving a shit ton of stuff out of this of what I'm explaining here. I mean, there were just numerous times. I mean, times that I can't even keep track of anymore, where you knew that whenever you would talk to her and she would tell you about how she hung out with so and so and didn't invite you or something, that it was no longer an by accident. And maybe some of that was my fault, man. It very well could be. Maybe it just got to a point where she didn't want to be around me anymore. But even if that's the case, then I mean that only increased the amount of animosity that I had towards her. So it was kind of like a cyclical type of thing. But whenever she passed away, one thing led to another. I received some inheritance from her, and it's been a massive ordeal here lately because it's to make matters worse, the inheritance was never left with any kind of guidance. The inheritance itself was managed by somebody who wasn't even family. We wound up having all sorts of problems with how it was arranged and stuff, and to say it's caused some problems is putting it extremely lightly. So fast forward to today, I've got the house paid off. Both my old car and old truck are paid off. I've got plenty of money in my checking account, a pretty sizable amount of money now in a savings account, and you know, you would think that with those kinds of cards in your deck, you would be happy, but you're not. And for me, it's got nothing to do with the money. It's got nothing to do, even really to a degree, with the loss of my grandmother. It's got everything to do with the fact that during some of this drama that happened, there were things that were said by other people in the family that were wrong, and not just about me, but about other members in the family. There was just a lot of shit that went down, and it's really been difficult to try to find a way to somehow have daily harmony in your life, despite the fact that you've got people in the family that are running around with preconceived notions about why you've done the things that you've done, running their mouth about things, you know, just all sorts of just stuff that's been so overwhelming that it literally for me at least, it really causes me problems to maintain some sort of daily regimen of normalcy. So it's really been difficult to try to find time to do things like make these little videos and stuff like that, you know, these uploads. To say nothing about all the stuff that's going on in the world in general. And there's also been a lot of stuff that's going on at work. Because right now, I don't know if I've ever explained this or not, but my background is in basically web design and web development, particularly with Drupal. And, you know, with that, you obviously have skill sets or an amount of experience in PHP and what they call full stack development, meaning the front end stuff like XHTML, HTML5, CSS, JavaScript, all that kind of crap, all the way down to things like MySQL, MariaDB. And for me in particular, I do a lot of stuff with Oracle now because of my employer. But the thing with me is that I work for a university, and when you do stuff in higher ed, IT, you soon realize that there's a massive void between what one experiences in the private sector versus what one experiences in a university where IT stuff is concerned. Because there, in the university life, there's more slack, and you can kind of relax more or less with what you do on a day-to-day. But there's way more politics. I mean, the politics is so insane. And when I say politics, I'm not just talking about things like making sure that some boss is appeased, or vying for certain kinds of roles or something that you want to have within the organization. I'm talking about politics as in like having a moron boss who thinks it's the best practice to outsource certain aspects of what you guys provide by way of using vendors that provide your organization with cloud-based alternatives. Because there are politics in that, despite the fact that it sounds more or less technical. I need to take a drink because my throat's getting dry. Anyway, the boss that I have right now, to bring it all back around, the boss that I have right now has always been kind of worthless. I mean, she's a nice lady, don't get me wrong. She's super kind, and she'd probably do anything for you if you ever asked her to. But she is so... I mean, if you were to look up the term dead weight, her portrait would have to be in there somewhere, because she's literally dead weight, and she kisses ass a lot, you know, with the boss that's above her. And both of them, both her and the other boss that's above her, they're both detached, they're both disrespectful, and they both practice that do as I say, not as I do mantra. Just this week, for example, she left work early, didn't notify her team, didn't send in a request to the staff calendar to indicate that she's taking leave out to leave work like you're supposed to do. She just left, and before she left, of course, she tells me to make sure that I send an email to some of our users for an upcoming upgrade that we're all supposed to do, as if I'm supposed to be their manager or something like that. And the same boss I'm talking about once scolded me for requesting that I be allowed to work remotely an additional day during a week when I took a remote day that week prior. And the reason I wanted it is because I wanted to stay at home and keep an eye on my sump pumps in my basement, because whenever we get a bad rain and stuff, it's important for me to be able to keep an eye on that shit, because if one of those things goes bad, then, you know, it's going to wind up causing some problems. And one of my sump pumps is right by my electrical panel, so if the check valve ever busts, that means then that the sump pump's going to start spraying water everywhere, and because of how close it is to my electrical panel, I'm, you know, you do the math there. So, you know, like I said, there's a lot of corruption where I am. There's a lot of corruption in the sense that the leadership there now cherry picks who they allow to do things like work remotely. And just this past week, our biggest boss sent an email, a global email out to everyone in our department, congratulating a few of the people for apparently receiving senior roles, despite the fact that he says that he said in the email, after he congratulated some of these people for obtaining the senior status, I guess, that just because these people received the senior status doesn't necessarily mean that it's commensurate of any type of salary adjustments. So basically what that means is that these people, they've got the role of senior now without any kind of pay adjustment. And what's hilarious is that one of the people that wound up receiving the senior role or senior title hadn't even been there as long as I have. So, I mean, it's just mess. It's a shit Sunday through and through. And because of this and a bunch of stuff that I haven't explained that's also happened, that I'm trying to keep private, you know, within reason, it's got me thinking a lot about trying to find a different job and trying to get the fuck out of this place that I'm working at, man, because it sucks there, man. We've had massive issues with turnover every year. I'd say, actually, for my boss alone, I think she's had about maybe 6 or 7 people quit, I mean, these past 2 to 3 years. And you need to understand that our immediate team that she's ahead of is normally comprised of only about 3 people. So that ought to give you an idea of just her alone. But our department in general has had such a massive turnover that one of the ongoing theories is that the reason our biggest boss sent out the email that he did to congratulate everyone for their senior title is because he's trying to stave that off. He's trying to keep people around because our budget right now is tight. Because I don't know if you know anything about higher ed for anybody that might happen to come across this video, but higher ed right now in the United States is kind of going through a little bit of a generational thing where a lot of the people haven't been replenished in terms of what universities would normally expect for their enrollment counts. And like I said, it's generational. There's like a thing right now where populations aren't really being replenished the way they used to be. And it's all related, man. It's all related to the economy, I mean, you can think about all sorts of stuff, the reputation of higher ed and how it's uber liberal, or it has been at least these past 5 to 10 years at minimum. So that's playing a part in it because a lot of people are looking at higher ed as if it's useless, because of those kinds of ideological types of perspectives. And by the way, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's some of the study stuff that we've seen about a lot of this that I'm talking about. But there's ideological issues there. There's a bunch of issues with the worth of a university degree in general, which is where you wind up hearing a lot in the news about a lot of people opting for things like the trades over the university education. And there's a lot of merit to that too, man. I mean, you've got a lot of people out there, and I'll even put myself in that bucket too, because when I was up in the city, despite the fact that I had an IT degree from my alma mater, I went through a period there where I was convinced that it was worthless. And sometimes I still feel a little bit like that. Not all the time, because you need to understand that whenever you have a degree from a university, it's not just about the major that you were a part of, man, because you're talking about a lot of legwork. You're talking about learning how to teach yourself, learning how to write and communicate. I mean, there is a shit ton of stuff that your degree represents besides just, knowing how to make websites or some shit, whatever it is that you majored in. But with that being said, though, there's a lot to be said also about the trades and having your hands dirty with stuff. And right now, at least in the United States, or at least where I am, which is Indiana, there is a massive demand for people who work in the trades. I don't know what like sliver of the trades is in the biggest demand or anything like that, but I know that, I mean, you take your pick: electricians, plumbers, pipe fitters, fucking whatever. They're all in massive demand, and from what at least I understand, the job prospects of these individuals is really awesome right now. I mean, and I think it's probably been like that for at least the past 5 years minimum. And I think a lot of it is probably carryover from the Great Recession back in '08 and '09, when people began to kind of change how they looked at the degree or degrees from universities. But anyway, right now, at least, there's just a lot of forces that are working against the university. And as a result, it's changing how guys like me do our job, because back in the day, you could have multiple computer systems in your office, and you could have access to all sorts of stuff with individual accounts, to systems that you use to do your job with. Your department wouldn't worry as much about whether or not you have a pirated copy of Adobe Photoshop on your system. There's just a bunch of stuff like that back in the day, uh, authority figures were a little more lax about. Well, now today, they're changing a lot of that kind of stuff and how they do things. Like, they're trying to limit the number of workstations you have, and because of vendor lock, companies like Microsoft are running ramshod normally throughout your organization, because, like, for example, here before too long, our organization is going to cease support for Windows 10. And unfortunately for me, I've got one system in there that's on Windows 10, and as part of the enforcement strategy, they're basically going to take your computer off of the network domain if your computer has Windows 10, which means that computer won't be able to access the internet. And again, a lot of that is because of vendor lock-in, but the reason it's vendor lock-in is because right now companies like Microsoft are able to get by with it because they have such a stronghold control over the market of that kind of thing that they don't really have to worry about my university, for example, switching from Windows to Linux or something like that. Because otherwise, you'd be able to, because if you were to do that, you'd be able to avoid that. Well, the the main guy that's running the show in my department, he's fully on board with Windows and Microsoft, so everything revolves around that type of stuff. And so that's just an example of how things are kind of changing. You know, they're trying to side skirt certain kinds of licensing expenses by putting things into the cloud, which means that you're going to wind up having fewer amounts of control over the things that you would normally be able to do if your thing was installed either on premise or on your workstation. I mean, it's just there's just a lot of bad stuff, man. And because of some of that type of thing, it also means that people are changing how they manage others and and how I don't know how lackadaisical they can be with certain things, or you know, we've got, like I said earlier on, we've got a few, mostly the senior people, that are being allowed to work remotely, as to where the people who aren't seniors, they're still they're expected to be coming into the office, and it's bullshit because, like with me, for example, I've got two old vehicles that I always worry about. I've got my sump pumps that I'd like to be able to stay home for whenever it rains. You know, I've got all these things that are going on, and it would make a lot of sense for me to be able to work remotely. Let me see here. This isn't going to be good. Um, thank God. Rhinos, man, they can tear you a new asshole if you're not careful. Anyway, there's just a lot of stuff that's going on at work with that sort of stuff, and it's it's given me a little more anxiety than I normally have because I see all of these people being allowed to work remotely with me being refused my requests, and it pisses me off. And through time, it's caused a lot of tension between myself and my direct manager, and it's even reached a certain point where I do everything I can to avoid her now, and basically everybody for that matter. I literally what happens for me, my day-to-day life now is that I come into my office at around 8 or 9, and I close my door. And because of how things are right now, I literally do everything I can to just kind of stay in my office and never talk to anyone. And what's scary is that it's like that almost for everyone else, from what I'm able to see at least. But because of how incompetent and detached and distracted everyone else is, it also means that every single day I'm in my office doing nothing except watching YouTube or watching movies that I bring in on a thumb drive. Now, don't get me wrong. If there's somebody that's sending me an email or calling me asking me for help with a thing, I do that. I do everything that I got to do to be able to keep everyone off my back. But if nobody's on my back and I've got my shit taken care of, I'm literally just sitting there watching movies, or you know, like I said earlier, watching YouTube. That's how dysfunctional the place is. Now, with that being said, I've not yet experienced a time where I'm worried about losing my job with anything, because I'm one of the guys over there that kind of is one of the kinds of guys you go to for help. I'm usually not to brag, and I don't want this to sound like a bragger type of comment or anything, but most of the time whenever I get involved with something, it's usually whenever somebody else fucks up. So I do have worth, is what I'm trying to explain here. But with that being said, though, our university did just go through some job cuts. It was the kind of positions, though, that you usually cut when you just need to free up some cash. And what I mean by that is that they got rid of some adjunct professors. They got rid of one or two kinds of marketing roles, you know, and they try to attrition out any vacancies that they have. That way they don't have to rehire anything, and they can shore up those resources into the budget and stuff like that. So I mean, it wasn't really a massive layoff type of ordeal, but because of all of the forces that are working against the university, combined with all of the politics and all of the BS and corruption and stuff that I've explained, it makes me believe that this kind of stuff must be going on across the country, and as a result, it's creating a situation where mom and dad are seeing this kind of stuff in the university amongst all the other stuff that they already see in the news, like with the liberal progressive ideology stuff, indoctrination stuff, so forth and so on. That it's just more of the mess that people are trying to avoid, and as a result, now I think it's beginning to kind of creep into the budgets of some of these universities, or at least I think it is with mine, at least. But all of this stuff, though, is what I'm getting at, is that all of this stuff is has all just been an anxiety Sunday for me. It's like worrying about stuff that's going on at work, and because I would really love to quit and just tell that whole entire place to just go fuck itself. But because of how the economy is, because of how my particular set of skills are, I can't just quit. It's not one of those things where back in the day when you were either a 20 something or a teenager, you could just tell a boss to go fuck himself and go pick up another job somewhere else. It's not like that for me. So unfortunately for me, I mean, that's been giving me a lot of stress lately, and stuff with, like I said earlier on, about the family stuff, about the deaths. It's just really been a difficult time in my life, and so whenever I'm dealing with all that stuff, the last thing that's on my mind is stuff like Rimworld. And I've also got a bunch of stuff that's kind of on the horizon too. Like, for example, this not this week, but on Saturday, this coming Saturday, I've got to take my truck to a local fabricator who's going to try to repair the driver's side rocker and cab corner of my truck, because it's kind of got some rust problems. And he's going to have the truck for at least a week, and that has me stressed out because I always try to drive my truck whenever it's got bad weather outside, because my little car that I have, it's a little two-seater convertible. It's 20 years old just about now. It's basically a Saturn Sky. I do not like to drive that thing out in bad weather, and that includes rain. So it's like, that's kind of got me stressed out, and because of some of the money that I've got now, that I can kind of do some stuff with, not the inheritance stuff, because I'm trying not to ever touch that. I'm just talking about like my money that I have from my checking account or my job. Because I have some of that money now to do things with, I've saved up enough to where I can start doing some stuff with my house, and I finally found a guy that I think is going to wind up doing some of the basement stuff that I've been trying to find someone to do stuff with. But that's kind of got me stressed out, because one of the things that he's going to be doing is that he's going to be adjusting an I-beam that's in my basement that about, I'd say, 60% of my house sits on. So it's like, okay, buddy, I hope you don't mess that up. And he and I had a long conversation about that, and he feels very confident about it. He didn't really seem to even faze him. But still though, this is my first time. This is my first home, and to have some stranger come into your house and start jacking around with some of that kind of stuff, it would give anybody some anxiety. And then but before he does that though, he's also going to be doing some porch work, because I've got a porch that has a roof that needs to be redone because it's got a couple leaks now, and and whenever you get into the thick of all this stuff, you start thinking about your money and stuff like that, and it's just like one goddamn thing after another, man. It's really, really stressful. So yeah, that's just been my life lately, man. It's just nothing but stress. And I'm sitting here whining about stuff when there's people out there that don't even have a home, or can't walk, or stuff like that. So I'm completely aware of that fact that there's people out there that have it worse. But just because somebody out there has it worse doesn't mean that you can just stop worrying about things, But I gotta admit, it's nice to kind of talk about it. kind of vent a little bit. I don't know what the future holds for me, but I'm at a financial state now to where I think if something stupid ever did happen, like if I lost my job over there at the place I work at, I think I could kind of get by for a while. But I'm just trying to find ways not to ever let that happen. I've been in situations similar to this at the place that I work at now, so it's not really something that's new. You know, there's been times when I was butting heads with management over there, and it'd be one of those kinds of situations where they would want to have a meeting with you the next morning and stuff, and you were sitting there all the night before chewing on shit and things like that, and it always wound up turning out okay. But it's because it's the frequency of these kinds of things that seem to happen, like the cherry picking of remote privileges, the disrespectful remarks during mixed company meetings, the stupidity of some of these role changes and titles that are given without things like pay. And for whatever it's worth, if it needs to be said, I'll say it. I'm not jealous of the people that gave that received the title change at all, because all of them are basically good people. One or two of them are a little questionable, but in general, though, they're still good people because I work with them all the time. And all of them except that one person had been there longer than I have. So I mean, at least as far as seniority is concerned, in terms of how long somebody's been there, I mean, I wouldn't have deserved that kind of title change anyway, or at least I don't think so. Based off of the amount of time you've been employed at the place, because one thing that they said, or the main guy said in the email, is that you only get that role change if you've been there for 15 years or longer. And I've been there as a staff member for 14 years. Now, granted, I've been there longer in terms of things like internships and other things like that, but that's different, though, you know. But again, I don't care about the role change or the title change, because all of those people are good people. I consider the majority of them my friends even. So I'm kind of happy for them in a way, but it's the fact though that you've got this main guy that's telling people that you get some sort of title change, but not really any kind of pay bump. It's the fact that one of the people had only been there for like a few years and got that title change. It's the fact that you've got these managers that are leaving work early, not telling their staff that they're leaving work early, and skimming off of their leave requirements, basically stealing from the university, you know, more or less. And they're sitting there cherry picking who their little favorites are to allow to work remotely, while refusing people like me the chance to work remotely, when those other people not normally even have like multiple people in their household that can stay at home and keep an eye on things, as to where with me, I'm by myself, you know, driving like 20-year-old vehicles into work 30 miles away each day, and I get refused to work remotely. It's just all of this stuff together, you know. And oh, and by the way, this year we didn't receive any kind of cost of living adjustments either. And understand that I'm not talking about a raise. There's a difference between a raise and a cost of living adjustment. A cost of living adjustment, which every employer should do for their staff, by the way, is when they basically adjust your salary or your wages to be commensurate to whatever the cost of living is in life. And we didn't, for the first time, I think in years, we didn't receive one. So that's another thing. You know, it's just like all of this stuff is just kind of mounting up over there at work. And then with me personally, I've got all this other stuff going on with my family, and all this stuff going on with the house or the vehicles that I have. It's just kind of hard to not, I don't know, to keep it all together, you know what I'm saying? I don't know what to say about it, man. But that's been my life, though, past however long it's been since the last upload I had. It's just been a shit ton of stuff going on. On a more positive light, though, I wound up having a window replaced in my living room, and I'm planning on trying to get more of those replaced as long as I'm still here a year or two from now. I'm happy that got done because that window that I'm talking about was in really bad shape. Thankfully, it didn't really look like whenever the guy that did the window work came over and did it, when he exposed everything, thankfully the majority of the wood uh, inside the wall and everything was not rotted, which I was actually expecting it to be rotted because of just how bad of a shape it was in. But the window he replaced it with, man, it's really nice. And I also got some kind of cool stuff from Amazon lately. Um, if any of you guys are like me and you like to work out, uh, there's a couple MP3 players that I think you guys would like. I'm going to pause my game real quick and load up my Amazon orders because I want to see if I can tell you which of the MP3 players they are that you might consider ordering. And they're really cool too because they're Bluetooth. They've got really huge amounts of storage and they're small and compact. And the reason it kind of came up for me is because the MP3 player that I did have, it was a Sansa, I think Clip Sport is what they're called. I had that sucker for like 8 or 9 years, maybe even 10, something really crazy, and it finally died on me. So I went out there and I started trying to look around to see if there was any, if those were even still being sold, and of course they weren't. But through some research, I found some other ones that I was a little hesitant on at first because I think they were both sold by Chinese providers. And don't get me wrong, man, I'm not a xenophobe or anything like that. I have nothing against Chinese people in general, but I'm just tired of the Chinese shit that I always wind up seeing on Amazon, man. Because 9 times out of 10, it is shit. It's built poorly. It's usually cheap, and sometimes it doesn't really come with any kinds of instructions or anything. But in this particular case, I've been pleasantly surprised because one of the MP3 players that I bought is this little thing. Now on Amazon, you need to understand that it shows up. It comes up as a portable kids MP3 player with sports clip, small music player with Bluetooth 5.3, touchscreen, built-in speaker, voice recorder, FM radio, expandable storage up to 512 gigabytes, and the model that I purchased was black. There's not really any kind of, at least from what I'm able to see, this particular MP3 player, it doesn't really seem to be by a given company that's legible on here. I don't know. In other words, what I'm trying to say here is that I don't know what company it's built from. It's not like a Sansa X, Y, and Z or a Western Digital whatever whatever. I can't find the freaking company name on this thing. But as far as its cost is concerned, though, it was only $31.99, and it is 10 times better than the Sansa Sport Clip thing that I had. I mean, 10 times better. It's really built well. It allows you to expand its storage up to 512 gigabytes, which I bought a little micro SD card for. Um, it's just awesome, and the music quality so far has been phenomenal. It's been just as good as my Sansa Sport Clip thing, and it's really tiny, which is what I love the most. And it's got a lock screen. It's just all around awesome. Oh, okay. Actually, it does have a company name. It's called, I guess it's by Collar Cool. I don't know if that's a known type of store or not, but on here at least it says that it's sold by Collar Cool, and that's actually true now that I think about it. Because whenever you start the thing up, it does have a Collar Cool little logo type thing at the beginning. But if you want a replacement MP3 player, consider getting this because this thing kicks ass, man. It really is awesome. And the other one that I bought is a 144 gigabyte MP3 player. And the reason I didn't have to have two MP3 players, but because of how affordable these things were, combined with the fact that these things love to go out all the time, I figured I'd play it safe this time and get two of them. And one of them was just because I wanted to try a different type, which is what this one is, which is the 144 gigabyte MP3 player. Um, Now the store it lists on here as being sold from is GEWDX store. GUDX, I don't know. You do the math on that, but I haven't used this one yet, but it is really cool. It's really small as well, and it feels like it's sturdy, and it's got buttons on it that you can use. So I don't know, man. I just thought that I'd kind of throw that out. But the price on this is $36.98, and it's another Bluetooth, blah blah blah. It plays radio. I guess it comes with 16 gigabytes internal storage, but you can increase that with a micro SD card. And I think the max that you can use for this one is, um, in terms of the SD card, I mean, it's a 128 gig max upgrade. But I got some MP3 players. I got some things for my car. I needed a new air filter because I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I've never changed the air filter in my car. Because I mean, in my defense, I mean, I never felt the need to, but I went ahead and finally bit the bullet. Bought one of those. Bought some what they call tulip clip or convertible top actuator clips, because those things I don't even think they're sold anymore anywhere else. The only place you can get stuff like that is on Amazon. But I bought some shirts. Bought a Twin Peaks shirt. It's kind of a cool shirt. It's a hold on a second. I think I accidentally touched my volume control. The Twin Peaks shirt that I bought it says who killed Laura Palmer, and if you know anything about Twin Peaks, you'll probably get a kick out of that. But I also got a an It miniseries T-shirt that shows Pennywise's laughing face, and I got a 1923 T-shirt from the Taylor Sheridan series. Bought some books. I'm trying to get into machining just as kind of like a hobby, so I bought some books about gear making and machining in general. It's like a For Dummies book. Bought some shirts. I don't know, man. I just bought a bunch of shit that a lot of it I probably didn't even need, including my new sushi knife. But because of all the shit that I've gone through, I've felt like, well, okay, maybe if we buy some shit from Amazon, we'll feel better. I don't know if that's. I don't think it's really had the effect that I hoped it had, but I'm still happy I bought some of the stuff that I got. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I think the world's fucked up, man. I hate to say stuff like this because it makes me sound like a downer, but sometimes I think that we're seeing the last breath of America. Sometimes, just the way things are. I mean, I've got a university degree. I've got some pretty awesome experience in my field. I have some pretty damn good connections for the most part, and I feel like the idea of quitting my job or getting fired is terrifying. And what scares me is the fact that I've got my house paid off, both my vehicles are paid off, I've got plenty of money stored, and if it scares me still to this degree, I can only imagine what other people are waking up to each day and going to bed with each night. I don't know what's really going to fix that. I mean, with me personally, I never really feel very good in general. It's just, I guess it's just in my DNA. I'm a worrywart. My mother always used to tell me I was a worrywart, and growing up and seeing things the way that I am, she's 100% right. I am definitely a worrywart. But in my defense, man, I feel like I've got a lot of stuff to defend myself with whenever it comes to that. I mean, I feel like I'm justified in a lot of ways, and anybody who knows anything about the way the world is right now, especially for the younger people that are out there trying to find jobs, submitting applications left and right, never getting calls, always being ghosted by employers, whatever. A lot of them, I think, would probably agree with me from the standpoint of thinking that the world's going through a lot of problems right now with stuff like providing stable livelihoods for people. I guess it's just like a cost and or a supply and demand type of thing, but I think when it comes to the world and seeing how things are, seeing how computerized everything is, seeing how automated everything's becoming, and now with everything going towards AI and all this stupid shit that's going on out there in the world, it's just making it more and more difficult for people to find ways to eke out a decent life. Not even a good life, but just one that they can be content with, or at least one that they can live with Excuse me. And it's scary, man. It really is. It's really, really fucking scary. And I always sometimes think that one reason we're in this mess is because a lot of the people that are in leadership roles, meaning like, your House and Senate, basically everyone that's in the legislature, the president, whether it be Trump or Biden or whoever, pick your poison, none of them seem to really be completely aware of just how bad it is where tech stuff is concerned, and especially where it's all headed. They don't seem to be on top of it as well as they should, and like my employer right now is, they're also kind of like the type of person or type of organization where they just let companies like Microsoft or Google or whoever run ramshot over anything and everything that comes up. And it really pisses me off. It kind of reminds me of something that happened here actually this past week. I got out there on YouTube, and I can't remember what the video was, but I watched a video, and I left a remark on there. It wasn't anything derogatory or, slanderous or anything. It was just a normal, hey, let's have a conversation about this, or at least, hey, here's my opinion of it, blah, blah, blah. Just normal, stupid remark. Nothing major. Well, I couldn't help but I couldn't understand why nobody had responded to it, because in my mind at least, I thought that the remark was really well thought out. It was articulate, clear, and it drove home some points that I thought were pretty pivotal about the subject matter of the video that I commented on. Well, that's when my mind began to kind of work and wonder if it was because I was being censored. And to make a long story short, it was. What I did was, to verify it, is that I went out to that same video where I posted the remark, and I opened up one of those incognito browsers or browser tabs, and I saw that the remark wasn't being displayed. And I knew it wasn't being displayed because there were only about 6 comments on the video at that point, because it's kind of a new video and stuff, and or at least it was either a new video or one that hadn't, or that I can't remember actually, to be honest with you. I can't remember if it was a new or old one, but I know that throughout the entire day there were only about 6 comments on there, and and so it was easy to find my comment if it was actually posted. And that's how I realized that it was being basically shadow censored. What now? Oh, we gotta, okay, because she's in labor. Well, anyway, it's just getting, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because it's getting to a point anymore to where you can't have even normal conversations online without the likes of companies like Google or Microsoft or anybody else for that matter pulling really shady shit like shadow censoring your stuff, where you'll post something and it'll look like it's visible to you, but what you don't realize is that it's not visible to everyone else because they've censored it, either through AI or maybe because there's like a moderator of the channel that's sitting there being, irritating like that, just whatever it is. I mean, it's just this type of shit. These companies, they're getting away with so much bullshit that it's really difficult to wrap your head around the enormity of it. And that's the thing that pisses me off about a lot of the people that are in power, whether it be the Democrats, Republicans, Trump, Biden, whoever. None of them are getting ahead of this shit, and they don't realize that it's affecting them too. I just wish I knew what the answer to that was, though, man. Because it's not getting better, it's getting way worse. Okay, let's gather. Let's see here. Alo is one of my main doctors. What I usually do in these situations, though, is only have about like maybe 1 or 2 kids besides the spouse. And the reason I do that is because in late game, at least, what I've discovered is that whenever your person's in labor, sometimes it takes a long time for the labor to finally complete. And depending on how long it takes, sometimes it can cause people to become unhinged, or almost even get to a point where they're starving. So I've tried to just limit it to the spouse and like 1 or 2 kids. Okay, so let me see here. Quest available. Well, there's that one, but I guess we got a new quest. What's this? Let's get rid of some of these. Let's see what this is. 50 refugees are approaching. No, thank you. I hate those quests. It's like 50. How am I supposed to freaking support that many people? I mean, yeah, sure, I've got a few beds here and some up here. But, I mean, get real, man. One thing that I've learned in this game is that if everything's going okay, try not to do anything that rocks that boat. and that quest would have done that. Excuse me. Well, if you've managed to stick it out to this long, or this point of this video, I appreciate it. I know my whining and stuff probably gets a little irritating, but like I said earlier, man, it's nice to just kind of vent a little bit, because there really has been a lot of stuff that's been going on. All this being said, though, I don't know when I'm going to upload another video. I thought a long time ago that I would maybe start something up in Skyrim, just because that's kind of a fun game. I just love Skyrim. I think it's super fun. But I also do have the upgraded version of Rimworld 2, so I've also thought about maybe starting that up. I just don't know. Kind of play it by ear. See how things go. How's the childbirth going? By the way, it wasn't Tyrified. It was someone else that had a stillborn. Because we buried him here. Fortunately, it doesn't say who the parents are, but that happened actually today, earlier today. So I was playing this a little bit earlier this morning. Anyway, it's getting kind of late on my side, so I think I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Save Skipoo. I hope all of you guys are doing okay. If you happen to see this video, no, it's not very entertaining, but I hope you're doing okay. I hope you're safe. I hope you're not dealing with deadbeat bosses like I am, or family deaths and all this effing shit, man. Let's try to stay safe. Do like what I try to do, where if you are going through stuff in your life, you just try to take it in stride, do the best you can with what you got, and try to find some sort of harmony in the idea that if there is any kind of higher power out there, that maybe there really is some sort of articulation to everything that we go through. Maybe there's some sort of like design, and maybe in some way, shape, or form, everything will just kind of fall into place. Gotta have some sort of faith. Now, with me personally, I don't consider myself a religious person per se. I've always considered myself agnostic, but the way I frame it in my mind is in that I can neither confirm nor deny the existence of God. That's how I frame it. I don't know if that's a good way of looking at it or not, but I can't shake the idea that there's something out there. There's just got to be. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? Okay, guys. Well, anyway, like I said, hope you're doing okay. Hope you're staying safe, healthy, and thanks for listening. If you tuned in, and I'd love to know what you think of the base. Let me know if you have any suggestions or thoughts on anything that I might be able to do to improve stuff. And I guess I'll just see you whenever I see you. Later.